Conjuring 2 told the story of a mother and her 4 children struggling with an entity that seemed to mean them harm, with acts of poltergeist violence and possession. In August 1977, Peggy Hodgson called the police in a panic. She claimed that furniture was moving on its own accord and that 2 of her children had heard eerie knockings coming from inside the walls. When the police arrived to investigate, they were left baffled, as they too witnessed the chair slide across the floor with no explanation as to how. Had it been manipulated in some way, or was something paranormal making itself known? Today, we will dissect the real story that inspired the movie and discuss the evidence as the tale unfolds. On Tuesday, August 30th, 1977, an exhausted, divorced mother of 4 named Peggy stormed into the bedroom of her 2 daughters, Janet and Margaret, aged 11 and 13. Thinking the girls were fighting and wanting some peace and quiet, she discovers the girls afraid and complaining that the bed was shaking. Now, kids are prone to fantasy, and with this in mind, Peggy thought nothing more of it. But the following evening, things started to escalate and she could no longer ignore what was happening inside her home. Peggy heard a shuffling noise as if someone was walking about, followed by 4 very loud knocks. As she went to investigate, a chest of drawers slid across the floor, blocking her way. Shocked, but fearing someone was inside her home, she pushed the drawers back, but instantly they blocked her way again. This time, they wouldn't move, no matter how much she tried to force them. Now terrified as you would be, Peggy grabbed her kids and tried to get help from her neighbours, the Nottingham family. Vic and his son Gary decided to take a look and, thinking it might be an intruder, was shocked to hear a knocking sound emanating throughout the home. Maybe it was a prank, as surely it couldn't be anything else, right? The police arrived at about 1 a.m. and checked the attic space, walls, piping throughout the property, but found nothing until a chair slid 3 to 4 feet in front of the officers, shocking all in the room. Over the course of the next 3 days, pieces of Lego and marbles were witnessed flying around the house, even hitting Vic. Various people tried to help, including members of the council and clergy, but nothing worked. Then on September 4th, Mrs. Nottingham made the decision to call the Daily Mirror newspaper in the hopes that they could help or put them in touch with someone who could. Along came reporter Douglas Bentz and photographer Graham Morris. Morris said, "I thought it was an ordinary job until I walked into the house. I stood in the gloom in the kitchen and one by one they brought the children into the adults' arms. And the last one to come in was Janet. Suddenly things just took off and started flying around the room. I got hit by a Lego brick over my right eye. It gave me a lump for a few days. There was a fair bit of force. There were marbles and things left in the kitchen that were just flying around the room. I was watching all of the family and none of them was doing anything." So the Mirror decided to investigate the claims further and sent along senior reporter George Fallows and photographer David Thorpe. They did their own investigation and concluded things could be faked by an expert. Due to how poor the family was, Fallows believed Peggy was behind it all, playing tricks in the hopes of improving their housing situation. But there were no experts living in the home that could produce such trickery, was there? Fallows figured further investigation was required and suggested contacting the Society for Physical Research. On September 5th, Maurice Gross visited the home and it didn't take long for the family's story to entice him to stay. After hearing a crashing sound and noting a chair had flipped over and moved a metre across the room. By September 10th, things were starting to move fast as the Daily Mirror published their story with the heading "The House of Strange Happenings," and Peggy appeared on a radio chat show called Nightline on LBC, which is a London station. When she got home that evening, she was met by Ros Morris from BBC's Radio 4 show The World This Weekend, who decided to join them for an overnight investigation. They were not disappointed, as there was flying marbles, jumping teaspoons, and a sofa which levitated and then crashed down to the floor, landing upside down. This was also the time when Janet was famously photographed leaping or being thrown from her bed and becoming the main target of the paranormal entity. Many believe that young girls especially are vulnerable to these types of spirits due to changes in the body and energy put out around the time of puberty. It is also thought that if a lot of emotional stress, anger, hurt, etc. is being felt within a household, this is like a beacon for poltergeists. In this family's case, it was very true, as the children feared their father, who had also left their mother for another woman. Janet's behaviour was becoming more alarming as the days went by. She would run at walls and start hitting her head against them, was more aggressive and swearing too. This escalation had her family fearing that she might end up killing herself. So when she got angry, it became the normal to have to physically restrain her. By the end of November, a doctor was called to the house and Janet was given a 10mg dose of Valium. But instead of calming the young girl down, she is said to have levitated and landed on top of a radio. Peggy even began to sense when occurrences would take place as she started to get intense headaches. It wasn't just people inside the house that were witnessing these spooky events either, as neighbours stated they saw a bright light about a foot tall shining in the Hodgson's window and then fading away. An old woman was seen standing at various windows at different times. Janet's brother Johnny also saw an old man with big teeth glaring at him. Now that is a lot of independent witnesses seeing some sort of spirit. After video proof was obtained of a sideboard overturning and Janet levitating, Gross decided to try to communicate with the entity through a method of tappings as answers. So, on November 5th, the test was set up and it was 1 rap for no and 2 for yes. It went as follows. Are you a male spirit? Did you used to live in the house? Was it more than 50 years ago? Did you die in this house? Are you unhappy? Why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? Are you having a game with me? At this remark, the entity threw a cardboard box and a pillow in Gross's face. On November 29th, a Brazilian psychic, Louis Gaparetto, offered their help and spiritual healing to the family. It is said he would go into trance-like states and produce drawings which seemed to prompt Janet to do the same. Was this a child mimicking for attention or another taunt from the entity? Whatever the case, Janet started to produce drawings which were disturbing in nature and kept on writing the name Watson. When this name was investigated, it was discovered the Watson family had once lived in that very house, with the wife dying from a tumour in her throat. This death was depicted in one of Janet's drawings. How could this child know of this? Did someone tell her? Or was it something supernatural, pulling the pen across the paper? Gross decided to try talking with the spirit once again. So on Saturday, December 3rd, the voice of Joe Watson was heard, described as being quite gruff in sound, but this identity changed to Bill Wilkins the following night.
Right, that's good. Shut her door. I'm 72 years old. I come from Conjuring graveyard and I have right near the church.
It sounded like the voice came from behind Janet's neck, and when Bill was pushed to talk about himself, he said he had died in the house aged 72, claiming he'd had a hemorrhage while asleep in a chair in the corner of the room downstairs.
Tuesday before I died, I went blind then. I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep. And I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
This claim was fact-checked with Bill's son Terry. When Bill was asked why no one could see him, he said it was because he was invisible, because he was a ghost.
Why can't Janet feel you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible?
So I'm a Jew. H-O-S-T.
Even when tests were carried out to see whether Janet was faking the voice, including holding water in her mouth and taping her mouth shut, the voice was still heard. One speech therapist examined the recordings and stated he was unsure where the voice was coming from, though they felt it bore some resemblance to a false vocal cord tone. This is done by muscle tension behind the throat that can produce sounds without the use of vocal cords, but it can result in a sore throat and possibly serious damage. Now, Janet would speak for hours at a time and have none of these symptoms. A hypnotist named Dr. Ian Fletcher decided to ask Janet questions while she was under a state of hypnosis. It went as follows. Do you know who is doing all this? Answer. Me and my sister. Why do you think you are to blame? Answer. I don't know who is. What does it feel like? Answer. Cold hands gripping me around my body. Who started the trouble? Answer. None of us. What is the cause of the trouble? Answer. an increase in unhappiness. Dr. Fletcher felt that this was not fraud, but stated he believed that some of the activity, like jumping from the bed, was the work of the sisters. In his mind, something was forcing them to do it against their will. Around Christmas, things escalated again, with Bill claiming to have killed the family fish and pet parakeet through spirit energy. And if that was not bad enough, Janet was found choking from a curtain that had wrapped itself around her throat. It didn't stop there though, as later that evening she said a kitchen knife was following her around upstairs, which was later found on the stairs by Peggy. Janet later said, "I was used and abused. There was levitation, there was voices, and then there was the curtain that wrapped itself around my neck, which was quite life-threatening for me. And it brought it home to me. This could kill me." In January, more strange events happened, with writing appearing on the walls of the property in fecal matter, followed by puddles of diarrhea, which after being tested were said to be cat urine. Enough was enough. The family was in so much pain and distress that it was decided Janet would attend Maudsley Hospital, which is a psychiatric facility in South London. Dr. Peter Fenwick carried out numerous physical and psychological tests and could find nothing wrong with her. While she was in the facility, events at home seemed to lessen, but not completely go away. But within 30 minutes of Janet's return home, she complained of seeing the spirit of a little boy. Finally, on October 2nd, yet another medium was called in. He claimed that a 24-year-old woman was at the centre of the hauntings and fit the description of Gross's deceased daughter, who had died in a car crash aged 24. Strangely, after this information was discovered, the hauntings dwindled down and then stopped altogether. Now, skeptics Anita Gregory and John Beloff found evidence that the girls were faking the incidents. They thought for the benefit of the journalists, while others said the paranormal investigators were too eager to believe, even though there was evidence it was a hoax. Some of these investigators are known from the movie Conjuring 2, and they are American demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, who visited the home in 1978. David Fontana said that Ed Warren was notorious for exaggerating and even making up incidents in such cases, often transforming a haunting case into one of demonic possession. In 2015, Deborah Hyde stated, "The first thing to note is that the occurrences didn't happen under controlled circumstances. People frequently see what they expect to see, their senses being organised and shaped by their prior experiences and beliefs." So what do you think? Do you believe it was all an elaborate hoax by two young girls desperate for attention and a way to escape their unhappiness? Did they manage to produce special effects that many adults would struggle with, like expert ventriloquism, moving heavy objects, and making items fly around the room? Some is fake, as the girls admitted, but were they coerced by a spiteful spirit, or did a haunting that was genuine give them attention that they were desperately craving? Let me know in the comments below what you feel is the truth. Janet and Margaret still stand by their story to this day. In 2011, Janet said, "Years later when Mum was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you." If this is true, and there is an uncomfortable feeling of being watched still going on in that house, it must be quite a startling thing to live with for the current owners, especially after the movie came out. Might even make someone want to move house.